Moi, je pense tout simplement que Bach étant un génie, et c'est la chose qui touche le plus, justement, c'est que la musique de Bach est naturelle.
Bach is for me the greatest genius in musical history, and it's because there's a fantastic balance between emotion and intelligence.
Ich weiß, dass er ein unfassbares Genie war, das Werke hervorgebracht hat, wo man eigentlich sich nicht vorstellen kann, wie das in einem Menschengehirn, in einem Menscheninneren entstehen kann.
Johann Sebastian Bach is history's most influential composer, yet we know extraordinarily little about him as a man. We have no idea even what he looked like in his youth or middle age. This famous portrait of him by Elias Gottlieb Hausmann was painted only a few years before he died. Although hundreds of composers have been unable to escape the power of his music, for more than a quarter of a millennium, Bach's personality seems to have evaded us. So who exactly was Johann Sebastian Bach?
Ein Genie.
Ich persönlich höre an Bach eigentlich das Heitere mehr heraus und nicht so sehr dem christlichen Glauben verbunden.
Ich würde euch sagen, es ist eine sehr gefühlvolle Musik, die auch eine Musik ist, die nicht an einem vorbeigeht, sondern schon eintrifft, aber eben, es ist eine Musik, die man eigentlich ständig hören kann.
Bach was born in Eisenach on 21 March 1685, the same year as the birth of his famous contemporary George Frederick Handel. This 17th century house has been converted into a Bach museum, but it's not actually where he lived. This is the street in which Bach's family is thought to have resided, formerly Fleischgasse, now Lutherstraße 35. Now this house is the present number 35, and here on the top bill is a sign that claims this to be the birthplace of Johann Sebastian Bach. Idyllic Thuringia, where Bach grew up, was actually a place of religious upheaval. Johann Sebastian was imbibed in Lutheranism, a user-friendly religion designed to reform the rituals of the Catholic Church. Luther composed hymns for Germans to sing in their own language and translated the Bible for them in the Wartburg Castle at Eisenach. Bach studied at this Latin school, the same one as Luther. His father, Johann Ambrosius, was leader of Eisenach's town band, and most of the Bach family were musicians. But tragically, by the time Bach was 10, both his parents had died, and he was taken in by his older brother, Christoph.
We know that Bach was certainly a very religious figure. We also know that religion is a very important part of coping with deep suffering and deep stress, and Bach certainly had a very stressful childhood, from what we know about it. And therefore maybe absorption into religion is a good, useful coping skill, because religion provides some kind of meaning to chaos and provides hope in the face of despair. So it may well be that Bach felt, for various reasons, therefore, very embedded in religion as a result of that.
The fact that he lost his parents at age 10 I think is significant in his upbringing, because it made him independent and independent-minded very early on. He moved after the parents' death to his brother's place in Ohrdruf, not very far from Eisenach, and grew up under the tutelage of his brother for 5 years. But I think he had his aspirations at that time to be like his brother, his older brother, and possibly to, go beyond what the brother achieved.
Christoph gave Bach his first music lessons, and when he was 15, Johann Sebastian won a singing scholarship which helped the children of poor parents, thereby enabling him to attend St. Michael's School in Lüneburg. The church where Bach sang was attached to a school for young aristocrats where French fashion was all the rage, since the whole of Europe was under the spell of King Louis XIV of France. It was during this time that Bach became an astonishing keyboard player, very much influenced by French as well as other styles.
a nice example of Bach's Northern German influence in this part from the Prelude 549. Of course, we know that Bach had lots of influences in his early age, and we can name lots of composers, but that's not necessary to do it. But it's very clear that the Northern German influence was extremely important for Bach. We see it as well in, like in the beginning of this piece, the pedal solo, the very clear prelude pedalitaire. You can imagine that Bach, at his young age, was an enormous virtuosic player on the pedals, because later in his life, people were talking about that he was surprising everybody with his enormous technique, playing quicker with the feet than other people could do with the hand. Of course, Bach had great lessons with people at his time. Think for Böhm, think for Reinken, think for his elder brother as well, but I think particularly he surpassed them all.
Bach's growing reputation as a virtuoso keyboard player got him his first serious appointment as organist of the Neue Kirche, or New Church, in picturesque Arnstadt. He was asked to test the church's new organ, and he so impressed his future employers with his playing that they offered him the job on the spot. Bach's stay at Arnstadt proved unsuccessful. He was obsessed with playing the organ and refused to coach the boys of the school choir. Not surprisingly, this confident but also obstinate young man became disliked. In 1705, his unpopularity peaked in a street fight with a bassoonist, whose playing he rudely criticized.
Dieses Duell mit den von ihm sogenannten Zippelfagottisten, das wird dann gleich ausgestrahlt auf sein ganzes Leben. So jähzornig war er aber gar nicht wahrscheinlich. Also er wurde, weil er diesen Fagottisten beschimpft hat, zum Beispiel eben von den Leuten, von den Schülern rausgefordert. Nicht? Es war nicht er, der dann sofort mit dem Degen auf den losging, sondern er wurde herausgefordert. Oder er hat eben mal in einer Probe hier in Leipzig mit seiner Perücke geworfen nach einem Musiker. Aber solche Dinge, die hat man viel stärker bei anderen Musikern noch gehört. Wenn jetzt bei ihm mehr bekannt wäre von seinem Wesen außerhalb seiner Musik, dann hätte sich das, glaube ich, relativiert.
A turning point in Bach's life came when he decided to travel to Lübeck to meet the great composer Dietrich Buxtehude. Unable to afford transport, he walked an incredible 200 miles to see and hear his idol.
Buxtehude's afternoon concerts, called Abendmusik, had become famous throughout Europe. They were very much designed for musicians to show off their virtuosity, and Bach possibly even joined in as a musician.
We have the libretto of the music that Buxtehude was writing in the Marienkirche in Lübeck. These series of cantatas were set to music using a number of different instrumental groups, spatially separated, groups of trumpets, groups of woodwind instruments, groups of stringed instruments, choirs divided and so on, all over the church. A practice that you associate usually more with Venice and the Italian tradition than you do with German Protestant music. But it was something that clearly Buxtehude did, and that in turn made a deep impression on Bach.
Bach's next appointment came as a godsend after his unhappy circumstances in Arnstadt. When he was 22, he took up a post in the free imperial city of Mühlhausen. This is where he wrote his first major cantatas.
He was fascinated by the opportunities to write music for a larger ensemble, mixed vocal ensemble. And I think he discovered that the challenges of musical composition were different in that realm. And at the same time, his experience as a vocal composer early on also informed him in his keyboard art. So I think it's a give and take. And eventually, he decided, well, to be a composer.
Bach's early cantatas are very special. We see as well his enormous feeling for colors. In like the Raadswahl cantate in Mühlhausen, where you see special groups of winds, strings, even trumpets, recorders, groups placed even at different places of the church, where you see a group of soloists, where you see a choir. And the interesting thing is that the influence of Buxtehude is so obvious, the influence of Böhm as well is so obvious. But still, Bach is there. Bach is very clearly with his own signature there.
A small windfall from his uncle made it possible for Johann Sebastian to marry his second cousin, Maria Barbara. But after 1 year, Bach became dissatisfied with the lack of what he called well-regulated church music in Mühlhausen and decided to resign.
Wir befinden uns hier im Stadtarchiv Mühlhausen. Hier liegt das Abschiedsgesuch von Johann Sebastian Bach. Es ist gerichtet an die Herren des Kirchenrates der Blasiuskirche. Datiert Mühlhausen, den 25. Juni 1708. Bach hat es eigenhändig unterschrieben. Dienstgehorsamster Johann Sebastian Bach. Es ist der älteste eigenhändig geschriebene Brief, der von Bach überliefert ist. Er liegt hier in Mühlhausen.
Und wie hat der Rat darauf reagiert?
Der Rat stimmte der Bitte Bachs zu und der Bürgermeister Dr. Konrad Meckbach schrieb, weil er nicht aufzuhalten, müsse man wohl in seine Demission einwilligen.
Wenn wir uns das Kündigungsschreiben Bachs an den Rat der Stadt Mühlhausen anschauen, müssen wir erst mal berücksichtigen, dass es ein offizielles Schreiben ist eines Anfang 20-Jährigen, dass also der Empfänger berücksichtigt werden muss. Er schreibt einen offiziellen Brief, den will er schön und ordentlich schreiben. Damit ist diese Schrift nicht ganz so expressiv wie andere, die man von Bach kennt, aber dennoch können wir sehr viel noch von ihm sehen, von seiner Persönlichkeit. Schaut man sich diese Schrift näher an unter der Lupe, dann sehen wir, dass hinter dieser ganzen Beherrschung eine eher etwas angegriffene Psyche steht. Also Bach ist zu dieser Zeit nervlich etwas angespannt, angegriffen, gestresst, würde man sagen. Und so als stünde er vor einer inneren Zerreißprobe.
Bach's most famous organ work is certainly his D minor toccata. Although there are doubts about if it was written in Mühlhausen, Arnstadt, or even later, it's still an incredibly beautiful piece, very virtuosic. If you think for all the tempo markings, allegrissimo, prestissimo, adagissimo, really belonging to the northern German style, very, very clearly, and I think astonishing piece.
Bach doubled his salary when he was 23 by moving to Weimar, seat of one of the biggest courts in Germany, in order to work for two dukes, Wilhelm Ernst and Ernst August. While still very young, Bach amassed wealth in Weimar, and here his career took off. Unfortunately, this is all that is left of the place where he lived. It was during his appointment at Weimar that Bach encountered the music of the Italian composer Antonio Vivaldi. One of Bach's students, the young Prince Johann Ernst, brought Vivaldi's 1712 collection of concertos, L'Estro Armonico, to Weimar from Amsterdam. Bach began to arrange them for keyboard instruments.
Vivaldi's very pointed way to come up with clear-cut harmonic structures and a rather obvious and simply designed motivic structure, Bach takes over, but he develops it into a more complex system. But it's clear that some of the basic ideas that become a permanent feature of Bach's compositional style comes from the Italian tradition of the modern school led by Vivaldi.
In 1714, Bach was promoted to Concertmeister. During the next 3 years, he produced concerto transcriptions, a series of masterful church cantatas, and numerous organ works, including a set of 18 organ chorales he would revise at the end of his life. Bach's employment in Weimar ended dramatically. Because of jealousies between the two dukes, he was passed over for the top position of Kapellmeister. Luckily, he was offered another Kapellmeister's post at Köthen, but Wilhelm Ernst wouldn't let him go immediately. Bach got so angry and abusive that he was thrown into prison for nearly a month.
I think he wanted to get out of Weimar, the narrow confines of Weimar. And when he had the opportunity to accept the Kapellmeistership in Köthen, he knew that the Köthen prince had just hired a band of musicians from the dismissed Berlin court chapel, and that he could start with musicians that were twice as good as the ones in Weimar. So he happily accepted the appointment in Köthen, not only to leave the rather miserable Weimar situation as it emerged, after all, but he expected that he would work very well with these first-rate musicians from Berlin in Köthen.
Bach's new appointment started in December 1717, when he was 32. His boss, Prince Leopold, was 9 years younger, and Leopold spent a quarter of the court's budget on his great hobby, music. Now he had the brilliant Johann Sebastian Bach as both his Kapellmeister and trophy composer. What could be better?
Die Musiker, mit denen Bach in Köthen zusammenarbeitete, waren die bestausgebildeten und vielleicht auch professionellsten, die er bis dahin erlebt hatte. Fürst Leopold gewährte ihm volle Unterstützung. Bach hatte viel Zeit, Stücke einzustudieren und auch auf die Bedürfnisse seiner Musiker genau zuzuschneiden, sodass jede Aufführung gründlich vorbereitet war und einen besonderen Erfolg dargestellt hat.
Les préludes et fugues de Bach sont très intéressantes et c'est une des raisons pour laquelle la musique de Bach peut se prêter au jeu du jazz. Par-dessus le marché, la façon d'écrire les basses de la musique de Bach, c'est le continuo. C'est très semblable aussi aux walking bass qui sont joués dans les musiciens de jazz. Et je trouve que cette musique existe déjà dans la musique de Bach.
Bach wrote just the music, noten, no phrasing, nothing, just noten, and he felt that musicians must know how to do it. It's same in jazz. If in jazz you have just some few notes and everybody change it for themselves.
In the summer, the young Prince Leopold would go to the fabulous spa town of Karlsbad. Bach went with him during 2 summers. The quality of the water was not the only thing that contributed to everyone having a splendid time. While he was in Karlsbad during the 2nd summer, Bach's wife died suddenly. At age 36, he married a professional soprano, Anna Magdalena Wilken, 16 years his junior, and someone he already knew and had worked with professionally.
We know basically nothing about his relationship with his first wife. We know a lot more about his relationship with Anna Magdalena. He wrote compositions specifically for her. We know that he got a singing bird for her because she liked to have pets like that. We have limited information, but all we know about this particular relationship is that there was a very intimate loving relationship between the two.
Die brandenburgischen Konzerte zeichnen sich durch die Vielfalt der Klangfarben aus, sodass jedes von ihnen einerseits ein typisches Concerto Grosso darstellt, auf der anderen Seite aber auch unverwechselbar und einmalig ist. Das 3. brandenburgische Konzert mutet mit seiner Besetzung für 3 Violinen, 3 Violen und 3 Celli plus Basso Continuo auf den ersten Blick ganz gewöhnlich an. Dem Hörer wird aber im Laufe der Zeit vorgeführt, dass jedes dieser Instrumente solistisch hervortreten kann, sodass sich wirklich ein Konzertieren von 10 Instrumenten ergibt.
Il y a même des moments où on a l'impression que c'est une bataille, où les 3 camps arrivent de différents côtés, ils vont se battre fatalement quelque part là devant nos yeux. Et oui, quand je parle visuellement, c'est une chose en effet qu'on peut presque constater sur la partition. Cette partition est une des plus belles à regarder parce que c'est comme une peinture abstraite.
The music budget at Köthen was cut when Prince Leopold was asked for military support by Prussia. Bach applied for the prestigious post of Kapellmeister and cantor of St. Thomas's Church in Leipzig. At 38, he was appointed to this position, which made him in effect the director of music for the entire city. He would remain there for the rest of his life. The St. Thomas Church School had a choral tradition stretching back 5 centuries. During Bach's time, it supplied 4 major churches. Today, St. Thomas's Choir, or Thomaner Chor, follows the same traditions as in Bach's day.
Die Thomaner sind zunächst Schüler, wie ihre Altersgenossen auch. Der Tag beginnt schon um 6:15 Uhr. Dann sind die Thomaner in der Schule. Wenn sie aus der Schule gekommen sind und Mittag gegessen haben, haben sie die sogenannte Arbeitszeit, wo die Hausaufgaben und andere schulische Aufgaben erledigt werden. Währenddessen findet schon individuell Stimmbildung und Instrumentalunterricht statt. Und dann beginnen die Chorproben, gestaffelt nach Stimmgruppen. Sopran, Alt, Tenor, Bass und am Schluss des Tages alle. Jede Woche ist ja ein neues Pensum zu erarbeiten. Jeden Freitag ist Motette. Anfang des 18. Jahrhunderts wurden die Leipziger immer interessierter, was wohl am Sonntag für eine Hauptmusik kommen werde. Und sie haben dann die Generalprobe besucht. Daraus ist die heutige Motette am Sonnabend entstanden.
During Bach's early years at Leipzig, he wrote a cantata virtually every week. To compose a cantata, Bach's first task was to find a suitable text and have it approved by the church authorities. The autograph scores show that he started with the opening movement and progressed without pre-planning to the end. Once the score was finished, all the parts had to be copied, probably starting with the choral parts, as the choir had to be rehearsed first. Then the strings, the wind, and finally the basso continuo. Extra parts, if needed, were copied from those already prepared. He would hear the whole work once before its performance on the Sunday. But sometimes there would be no time at all for rehearsal.
His working week must have been fairly horrendous. One imagines Monday and Tuesday composing. Wednesday he would start to rehearse the boys. Often pretty recalcitrant bunch of kids, and he had difficulty in getting the results that he wanted. And actually later on in his time at Leipzig, he simplified that task by getting him just to sing the melodies of the chorales and put all the elaborate contrapuntal lines, gave them to the alto, tenor, and bass. Then on Thursday he would start presumably to rehearse the instrumentarium, the orchestra, who were in themselves a bit of a ragbab and bobtail of the music profession there. There were the trumpets that came from the town, there were the students from his own collegium, there were the other students in the Thomasschule, and from then he had, from that extremely rough piece of cloth, he had to construct the most wonderful suit of clothes.
In 6 years at Leipzig, Bach produced a staggering total of around 190 cantatas. But during this period, he also composed a Magnificat, the St. John Passion and the St. Matthew Passion, and in addition, he found time to provide for domestic music making as preserved in the collection of pieces he assembled for Anna Magdalena. Contrary to popular belief, Bach was not poor in Leipzig. His basic wages may have been modest, but he was paid extra for virtually everything he did and could earn up to 8 times his basic salary. For example, he was paid extra money from funerals and weddings. But after 7 years at Leipzig, he complained that due to mild weather, not enough people were dying. Bach's home was a musical workshop. Manuscripts indicate that Anna Magdalena, his students, and his children acted as copyists for him. But it seems difficult to imagine a scene with Bach working so hard at composing and Anna Magdalena producing no less than 12 children in 15 years. As was all too typical at the time, 8 out of the 12 died.
So one would consider any surviving child as a gift of God. And I think one also would accept the death of a child as God-given. So I don't think that was a problem for him, except that, you know, the loss of a child, the loss of a beloved person is always something that, you know, makes a tremendous difference. At the same time, I think the fact that for Bach and people of his day, life and death become so closely intertwined is responsible for the depth and the emotional power of his music.
Despite Bach's dissatisfaction with his daily working life, his creative ambition was unstoppable. When he was 42, he gathered together choirs and musicians from all over Leipzig to perform his extraordinary masterpiece, the St. Matthew Passion, a work on a scale unprecedented in Western religious music.
Oui, les Passions de Bach, un autre chapitre dans Saint-Matthieu, une grande fresque d'une dimension jusqu'à ce moment-là pas souvent pratiquée. C'est-à-dire c'est une grande fresque avec des grands blocs d'événements qui sont très opposés les uns aux autres, c'est clair-obscur, c'est tout. C'est vraiment une œuvre baroque dans tout le sens, en profondeur. C'est presque un film, on pourrait dire, avec des close-up et des images plus générales.
It's written for a very, very specific creed, a very, very specific type of believer, and yet the sheer musicality of his output is such that you don't need to be a believing Christian, you don't need to be a Lutheran, you don't need to be a trained organist or a trained singer to subscribe to the emotions that are imbued by Bach in this music, and also to sense the euphoria and the ecstasy of his music making.
By 1730, when Bach was 45, his gigantic cantata production had slowed down considerably. He became deeply unhappy with conditions for church music at Leipzig. In a memorandum to the Leipzig City Council, he explained his grievances.
In conclusion, I find it necessary to append the enumeration of the present alumni, to indicate the proficiency of each in musicis, and thus to leave it to riper reflection whether in such circumstances the music can continue to be maintained, or whether its still greater decline is to be feared. It is, however, necessary to divide the whole group into 3 classes. Total 17 usable, 20 not yet usable, and 17 unfit.
Also wenn wir uns Bachs Brief an den Rat der Stadt Leipzig anschauen, in dem er den Entwurf einer wohlbestallten Kirchenmusik vorlegt, haben wir ein sehr gutes Beispiel, um zu sehen, zu welchem Gefühlsreichtum und zu welcher breiten Palette an Gefühlen Bach fähig war. Wir haben hier also sowohl seine weiche Sensibilität und Empfänglichkeit und Mitschwingungsfähigkeit im Emotionalen, wie auch Leidenschaftlichkeit, Kampfgeist und Auseinandersetzungsbereitschaft, wenn es ihm um eine wichtige Sache ging. Da stellt er sich also mit vollem Engagement dahinter und kämpft dann auch. Da können auch scharfe Worte einmal fallen, ja, wenn es ihm wichtig ist. Oder wenn er sich mit Dummheit und Borniertheit auseinandersetzen muss und Unfähigkeit, kann ihm der Kragen platzen. Das ist also in diesem dynamischen Temperament unbedingt enthalten. Aber er hat eben auch die andere Seite, die Wärme, die Kontaktfähigkeit, auch Genussfähigkeit und Freude am Leben, die also Streitsucht, Zänkischkeit einfach ausschließen. Das ist unhaltbar, diese Merkmale als wesensbestimmend für Bach hinzustellen. Geht einfach graphologisch überhaupt nicht zu belegen.
Als man sich im Jahre 1894 dazu entschloss, die sterblichen Überreste Johann Sebastian Bachs auszugraben, stieß man an der angegebenen Stelle auf einen Eichensarg, der das Skelett eines etwa 70-jährigen Mannes enthielt. Der Anatom Wilhelm Hiss wurde herangezogen, um die Gebeine als die Johann Sebastian Bachs zu identifizieren. Er zog dazu das Hausmannporträt, das einzig authentische Altersbildnis Johann Sebastian Bachs, heran und konnte zeigen, dass die Schädelformen mit denen des Porträts weitgehend übereinstimmten.
Bach's skull was by no means normal in appearance, and certainly many of the aspects of the brain that are linked to hearing and auditory processing were clearly abnormally enlarged, so much so that they had left abnormal markings on the inside of the skull. So, for example, the temporal lobes of the brain, which are the parts of the brain that sit nearest the ears, and other parts involved with auditory processing, listening to music and analysing it or listening to sounds, were clearly abnormally enlarged in Bach. And also the cochlea, which is the inner ear, again the part involved in decoding sounds, was also abnormally large. Now, this raises a very interesting question, which is, where does this lead us in terms of understanding the neurophysiology of musical genius? Is it the case that Bach was born, as it were, with a musical brain? Or was it the case that listening and being involved in music over many years actually altered his brain architecture?
After 1734, Bach's already stagnating situation in Leipzig deteriorated when a new rector at St. Thomas's wanted less attention given to church music. Their disagreements were finally resolved by the Saxonian court in Dresden after Bach was appointed honorary Kapellmeister and composer to the Elector of Saxony. Bach now began to withdraw into a kind of self-styled retirement and devoted himself only to projects of his own choice. His music now developed in a fresh direction, partly influenced by the new galant style he had heard in Dresden.
Le style galant, qui est une chose, disons, qui va vers le rococo, ou prend distance vis-à-vis de la musique trop scientifique, trop contrapuntique, trop difficile, trop méditative, en faveur d'une perception plus facile. On dirait, dans la galanterie, c'est les qualités mélodiques qui doivent primer avec une harmonisation assez simple pour que l'impact soit, disons, direct vers le cœur, sans passer trop par la tête.
One of Bach's works that was influenced by this new galant style appeared in 1742, 8 years before his death. It was a set of variations allegedly commissioned by a Dresden nobleman, Count Kaiserling, who battled insomnia with music played by a harpsichordist in his service, Johann Gottlieb Goldberg. The galant style is characterized by a less dense texture as well as a simpler harmonic plan. Another city to which Bach aspired in the last decade of his life, in terms of political power as well as culture, was Berlin. His most famous visit to Berlin was in 1747, 3 years before his death, when he was received by King Frederick the Great of Prussia, an accomplished flute player. The king asked Bach to improvise on a theme. Bach obliged and promised to write it out. This was to become part of the musical offering, in which the royal theme is subjected to a dazzling array of contrapuntal and galant invention. Towards the end of his life, Bach became fascinated with the rigorously complex music of the 16th century Italian composer Palestrina, especially with some of his compositions in a strict style known as the stile antico. One of the best examples of the influences on Bach of the stile antico is in his B minor Mass. Unperformed in his lifetime, it consists of music composed between 1714 and 1749, an extraordinary 35 years, drawing together all the strands of his musical output. It is both an anthology and a summation of his choral writing, spanning a vast array of styles.
For me, Bach's B minor Mass is one of his greatest masterworks. I like it particularly because I see the young Bach and the old Bach next to each other. I see as well old style and new style next to each other. You see, apart from a cantata written when he was 25 years old, and the latest piece he ever wrote in his life, which is really gallant style, and to see that the original music there that Bach wrote for the B minor is so little, everything mixed so well together.
Bach became practically blind due to cataracts near the end of his life. Early in 1750, he was treated for them, but later that year he suffered a stroke. He died on 28 July 1750, aged 65. Bach left close to 1,200 pieces of music. His influence has been immeasurable. From Mozart, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, Liszt, and Mahler, to Schoenberg, Stravinsky, Berg, and such modern-day masters as Boulez. Virtually no musician over the past 250 years has been unaffected by Bach's music. His compositions are undoubtedly among the most intellectually and technically challenging in the history of music, yet they have the most profound and moving effect on their listeners. The complexity of Bach's work not only reflects his own extraordinary quest for perfection, it reveals a technical mastery over almost every facet of his musical heritage. Moreover, he placed this mastery in the service of a philosophical, intellectual, and above all, spiritual depiction and contemplation of the human experience.